Have you ever felt that loving a woman drains you more than it fills you? Not because you're weak, but because you've given too much to the wrong place. They say men are afraid of love. Men are afraid of losing themselves when they love the wrong person. You loved with kindness. You tried to stay calm even when misunderstood. You compromised, stayed silent, apologized, just to hold on to something that was slowly wearing you down. And then, when you began to pull back, no more arguing, no more begging, no more forcing yourself, society slapped a label on you: avoidant, cold, not man enough. But the truth is, you just woke up. You realized you're not a dumping ground for someone else's emotions. You realized silence isn't weakness, it's self-preservation. You realized love means nothing if you have to shrink yourself to fit into someone else's expectations. You started loving your peace more. Started seeing lonely afternoons not as scary but as sacred. Started to understand that having no one beside you isn't worse than being with someone who still makes you feel alone. You're not lonely. You're clear-headed. And this society, it doesn't like clear-headed men, because clear-headed men aren't easy to manipulate, aren't easy to guilt-trip, aren't quick to give their all just out of fear of being left behind. This isn't a lesson for everyone. It's for those who've loved, lost, and are now learning how to hold on to themselves. If you've ever gone quiet and no one understood why, if you've ever chosen not to text back, not to chase, not to make things right, maybe you're not getting weaker. You're growing stronger in a way others don't have the courage to understand. There was a time when a man was judged by whether he had a wife. Having a family meant being responsible. Having a wife meant you were settled. That society used to place marriage on a pedestal, the highest badge of adulthood and personal worth. But what's the truth? A marriage certificate doesn't make you stronger. A ring doesn't make you a better version of yourself. And having a woman next to you 24/7 doesn't mean you're living right, living fully, or living authentically. People will give you pitying looks when you dine alone. They'll ask, "Why aren't you married yet?" They'll say, "It's always better to have someone." But those are the words of people who've never had their energy drained by a weary relationship. People who've never sacrificed personal freedom to maintain a household built on control, criticism, and unfair expectations. And more importantly, they are not you. You don't need a woman to feel enough. You don't need a marriage to be recognized as a real man. Your worth doesn't lie in someone holding your hand in public. It lies in your ability to stand tall even when no one stands with you. Society will keep throwing labels at you, but you're no longer living for the eyes of others. You're living to protect the one thing that's still sacred after all this: your dignity. And if anyone ever made you feel incomplete just because you're single, remember this: if you need someone else to feel valuable, then your worth was already lost. And maybe that's why the next truth is harder to hear but necessary. More and more women are entering relationships without bringing any real value, aside from the expectation that you'll do everything for both of you. They don't need to understand you. They just need you to perform. They don't ask how exhausted you are. They just remind you that you forgot your anniversary. They don't notice your effort to stay respectful in a heated argument. They just count how many times you're wrong and call it standards. You walked into the relationship hoping for partnership, but the deeper you go, the more you realize the burden isn't shared. You carry the finances. You carry the emotions. You hold the relationship together. While she waits for you to guess her feelings, waits for you to take the lead, waits for you to fix everything, even what wasn't your fault. And when you fall out of sync with her expectations, suddenly you're labeled as not trying hard enough, not serious, not a real man. The sad part is, most of these women aren't bad people. They just were never taught that love is a two-way street. They enter relationships expecting to be served, not to build something together. They believe showing up is enough, the rest is on you. You're tested. You're doubted. You're compared. Everything you do, even from a place of sincerity, is seen as bare minimum. If you don't meet it, you've failed. You're not up to standard. You're used to giving because society taught you that love means giving. But no one told you, if only one person is giving, that's not love, it's exploitation dressed in sweetness. You don't need someone who climbs on your shoulders just to tell you you're not tall enough. You need a real partner. Someone who walks with you, not someone handing out demands. And when you start asking, aside from her presence and expectations, what does she truly bring? That's when you know you've grown enough to distinguish between connection and consumption. Not all love is worth holding on to. Some love, when you look closely, is just burden in disguise. And you have every right to walk away, not because you're afraid to love, but because you've grown enough to know peace is not something to be traded. Not for anyone. When you live alone, you live in rhythm with yourself. You wake when you want. You eat what you like. You spend your money without asking for approval. You move, rest, work all on your own terms. That's not selfishness. That's autonomy. But when you enter a relationship, what happens? Freedom doesn't disappear all at once. It leaks, bit by bit. First, it's your schedule. You shift it to match hers. Then it's your spending choices. You start wondering if what you want is too selfish. Then come the explanations. Why you came home late. Why you need silence. Why you're not excited about a dinner with her friends you've never met. Each question, each glance, each expectant look. They slowly chip away at the most precious thing you have. Your right to live by your own design. You're no longer yourself. You become a version edited for her comfort, her space, her standards. Maybe you think, that's compromise. That's what love requires. And yes, in a healthy relationship, compromise is essential. But when all the compromises come from one side, when you're the one always shrinking, always adjusting, always apologizing, that's no longer love. That's erosion. The problem is, you don't notice it right away. Because the loss of freedom doesn't come with an explosion. It comes with a sigh. One day, you realize you don't feel at peace in your own home. You can't sit still with your own thoughts. And you start to ask, who am I really living for? That's when you understand. Freedom is something men only learn to value after losing it. And once you've tasted it again, you won't easily let anyone take it from you a second time. There will come a time when you no longer ask, how much do I love her? Instead, you start asking, in this relationship, who's building and who's consuming? It's a truth rarely spoken, but one you need to see clearly. Because so many relationships aren't built on partnership. They're built on a man carrying everything, while the woman stands by, waiting to receive. You are the builder. You build with your finances paying for everything, big and small. You build with emotional stability, staying calm in anger, initiating peace, accepting blame just to avoid silent wars. You build with time, care, attention, always checking whether she's happy or sad that day. And her, she consumes your money, your energy, your peace of mind. Worse still, when you stop building, everything collapses. Not because she can't build, but because she never learned how. And when you finally pull back, when you stop exhausting yourself, she doesn't turn to ask, are you okay? She turns away so quickly it stuns you, as if you never built anything meaningful, as if everything you did was just the bare minimum. That's the most painful moment when you realize you weren't loved. You were the provider, the sustainer, the comfort giver, and once you couldn't provide anymore, you weren't kept around. Don't confuse love with constantly giving while receiving nothing in return. Don't call it partnership if all you do is carry the entire journey alone. Fairness doesn't come from sweet words. It comes from actions, from whether she ever built anything for you beyond expectations. Because at the end of the day, a man doesn't quit because he's tired. He quits when he realizes he's been building a house on his own back, while someone else just stood there watching. From a young age, you were taught that men must be strong, must carry the weight, must sacrifice, must be the first to apologize, the first to make peace. And when the relationship has problems, the first one expected to change is usually you. You were taught how to be a good man, but no one taught you how to tell the difference between love and being used. No one taught you how to protect your energy, your time, your self-respect from people who come only to take, not to build. Society painted the ideal man as calm, generous, forgiving even when the other person doesn't deserve it. You were encouraged to give as much as possible: money, understanding, second chances, time, emotion, until you run dry. And by the time you start asking, am I being used? The answer doesn't come from the outside, because society will call you selfish, petty, irresponsible. They don't see the erosion happening inside you every single day. You're not weak. You just were never taught how to survive emotionally. You thought love meant effort, meant giving unconditionally. But love is not an unpaid job. It's not a bottomless well where you pour your soul just to feel a flicker of warmth in return. Real love doesn't ask you to lose yourself to be accepted. It doesn't demand that you always stay silent, always yield, always carry the blame just to keep someone who no longer sees you. And marriage? Marriage isn't immune to manipulation. It can be a home, but it can also become a soft prison where you hand over every key because you think that's a man's responsibility. Even the relationships that seem serious and healthy can turn into sweet traps, where you're drained layer by layer, your identity, your freedom, your energy without even realizing it, because you think this is what you do when you love for real. And the truth is, if you were never taught how to recognize boundaries, you'll cross them unconsciously. If you were never taught how to hold on to your core self, you'll lose yourself and won't realize it until it's too late. And then you wake up in a relationship that's no longer love, but an emotional contract you signed with your silence. You weren't wrong for loving deeply, but now it's time to learn how to love without losing yourself. You're not weak. You just lack the knowledge of emotional survival. And then, after you've gone far enough, you stop searching for the feeling of being loved. You begin craving something else, something love never quite gave you before. Peace. After 35, men begin to change. Not because of heartbreak, but because of clarity. You no longer want to stay up all night arguing about trivial things. You no longer want to spend your day off following someone around, with not a single moment to yourself. You no longer want to live in constant tension from all the small things that pile up week after week. You start to realize that what you need isn't someone to fill a void. You need space to breathe, to recover, to be yourself without judgment. You need control over your time, your finances, your emotional climate. You need silence, not the forced kind that comes from cold wars, but the kind that lets you rest without having to perform. Love used to be a beautiful dream, but now that dream comes with too many conditions. Be gentle enough, earn enough, be romantic enough, strong enough, a good listener, but don't stay silent too long. You suddenly understand, if a relationship makes you constantly earn your place, it's not love, it's a job interview. And when men finally wake up, they pull back not because they don't need anyone, but because they finally know their worth. And that worth isn't measured by how many times you cheer someone up. It's measured by how much peace you can keep inside you, even if it's just while sipping coffee alone in silence. If love shows up, it must bring peace with it. If not, it's just another emotional addiction you'll have to detox from. But what's more important is this. No one teaches you how to protect that peace. There's no system that supports you when you step out of the emotional race. No legal code that says you're allowed to be alone without being seen as a failure. Women have the law, social support, solidarity, even empowering language. Independent woman, free woman. But you have yourself, your awareness, and one quiet decision to step away at the right time. That's why you need to stay sharper than ever. Because this world doesn't protect male freedom. It defines you by what you can offer others. And when you stop offering, you get redefined as useless, difficult, lonely. You don't need to hate women. You don't have to reject love. You just have to stop romanticizing it as salvation. Because sometimes, it's love when it comes the wrong way that takes you the farthest from who you truly are. Freedom doesn't mean avoiding all relationships. It means being wise enough to know what kind of relationship you want, and brave enough to walk away from anyone who can't meet that. Peace is a standard, not a reward. And if someone comes into your life and even slightly disturbs that peace, they don't deserve to stay. No one protects your boundaries but you. And sometimes, refusing the wrong kind of love is the most powerful form of self-love there is. If you're in that phase of life where you don't need to explain, don't need to justify, just need to live in your own rhythm, know this, you're not alone. You're just choosing what many men know, but few have the courage to choose. I'm not against love. I just won't sell my soul for it.